Seo stands in the shadows of the cave, watching the group as they whisper amongst themselves. He overhears the terrifying reality of their plan. Now that he's been debilitated and lost an arm, Section Chief John wants to continue using him as a living sacrifice, chopping off another limb every week to satisfy the forest's master. Seo's hand slowly reaches down and grips a heavy, jagged rock with a rhythmic thud. John continues his discussion with the others, casually remarking that the situation is definitely not pleasing for anyone involved, clearly trying to justify his cruelty as a necessary evil for the group's survival. Seo looks at the stone in his hand, his eyes turning cold. He knows that with the pure violence he mastered over 50 years of being beaten and broken, he could easily end a modern man like John Myung-hoon with just his one remaining arm. As John continues to gesture and posture in front of the group, Seo's gaze narrows into a predatory stare. A single, dark thought echoes in his mind: should I kill him? After a long, tense moment, Seo lets out a heavy, weary sigh and lets the rock fall back to the ground with a soft thunk. No, he decides against it. He realizes that the group's fear has likely paralyzed their better judgment, and if he acts too cruelly now, it will jeopardize his vital relationship with Director Kim. Instead of murder, Seo opts for a chilling warning. He looks John in the eye and tells him to shut his mouth if he doesn't want to feel his ankles snap again. He watches the man shrink back, thinking to himself that despite their flaws, these are generally good people who are simply overwhelmed by a confusing situation. As the clouds drift across the moonlit sky, the first night in the martial realm finally begins to settle. The next morning, the forest is bathed in a deceptively peaceful light. However, the group is quickly confronted by another nightmare, a massive, two-headed red snake. Unlike the fox, this beast only demands a small amount of blood. Seo remembers this creature vividly. In his last life, it was the same snake that drained Chief O after he had already been maimed. Wanting to prove his worth, Chief O steps forward this time, offering his arm and rolling up his sleeve with a nervous gulp. The snake bites down, but immediately recoils with a disgusted, "You." Blag. It spits the blood out, hissing that this is the worst, most bitter human blood it has ever tasted. Seo watches the exchange before turning his attention to his former bully. He addresses him by his full name, John Myung-hoon, and tells him to come along to pick herbs. John is taken aback by the lack of honorifics, but Seo ignores the protest, asking if he's hungry. John, sitting tiredly on the grass, admits that he is. Seo leads him away, promising to teach him which fruits and herbs are edible. As they walk, Seo leans in close, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. He lies to John, telling him that he plans to sacrifice his other arm to the fox next week, and if he dies, someone else needs to know how to survive. John's face lights up with a pathetic, relieved smile. He laughs and thanks Seo profusely, genuinely believing he's being saved. Seo just watches him with a hollow look, knowing the fox isn't coming back and that John will never actually need this knowledge. Under the burning sun, the lessons begin. Seo begins screaming at John with an intensity that matches the man's former corporate rage. He yells at him to concentrate, berating him for picking the wrong fruit. John trembles, clutching a handful of berries and stammering out apologies. Seo barks that picking the wrong thing will get him killed. He continues to drive John like a slave, forcing him to scramble through the brush while he stands over him. Eventually, John collapses in the dirt, gasping for air and begging for a break after digging non-stop. Seo looks down at him without a shred of pity. This is exactly how John used to punish him back at the company, and he coldly tells him to hurry up because they need to finish before dusk. They move deeper into the woods near a waterfall, where Seo spots a specific plant with red berries. John digs it up and gasps in shock, wondering if he's just found a massive piece of natural ginseng. He holds the giant root up, his eyes wide with greed and amazement. Seo confirms it resembles ginseng, but clarifies that it is actually a yellow bamboo root. Seo knows that while this root is useless to high-level cultivators, it is a priceless treasure for martial artists to increase their chi. He realizes this is the key to helping Director Kim gain power quickly. He points out 2 more roots and tells John to take off his shirt to carry them all back. Suddenly the air itself seems to shatter with a violent explosion of light and sound. John is thrown to the ground screaming in agony. Chief O collapses as well, clutching his chest in pain. The rest of the group panics, wondering what is happening to their friends. 3 figures suddenly descend from the heavens, hovering in the air like gods. One of them, dressed in ornate yellow robes, looks down and remarks on the uncut talent they've found him. The orange-jacketed man looks up in terror, asking who they are. As the figures begin to argue amongst themselves, the newcomers land and one of them coldly observes the group, stating that only 3 of them possess spiritual roots while the rest are nothing more than normal mortals. Without another word, the figure in yellow raises a hand and a bolt of searing golden lightning strikes Section Chief John, leaving him screaming as his destiny is decided by forces he can't even begin to comprehend. The atmosphere shifts instantly as one of the women groans in pain, the sheer pressure of the immortal's presence causing her to buckle. Suddenly a violent surge of energy erupts, the ground shaking as the newcomers display their overwhelming power. One of them, a figure with Alut looks on with a twisted manic grin, cackling about finding a ghostly yin transforming immortal root, a treasure so rare she can hardly believe it actually exists. Another immortal lands with a heavy earth-shattering thud. A massive muscular man with a golden headband towers over one of the survivors, his hand glowing with a brilliant blue light. As he grips their shoulder he bellows in excitement, realizing he's just stumbled upon a unique holy body. The giants of this world look down at the tiny, terrified humans and ask how a certain deal sounds. They promise immortality, the power to overturn the very heavens, and a life of absolute fame and wealth within 100 years. But the humans don't care about glory, they are paralyzed by fear. One of them begs the immortals to just help them out of the forest, crying out that they're all going to die if they stay here. Ignoring the pleas for help, one of the immortals uncorks a small ornate bottle, releasing a faint wisp of mist. The massive warrior, now carrying one of the abducted humans like a sack of potatoes, notes that one of the mortals actually had the balls to offer up his own arm to the forest's fox. He looks down at the kneeling Seo, whose missing limb is suddenly bathed in a surge of blue spiritual energy. The immortal admits that while Seo is just a mere mortal, he certainly has guts. Seo, feeling the life return to his body, can only offer a quiet word of thanks. With their recruits in tow, the immortals prepare to leave. They casually mention that they've captured all the beasts and monsters along the ascension path, so the area should be perfectly safe for the next 10 years. They take to the skies, disappearing into the clouds as the remaining survivors scream out the names of their kidnapped colleagues. Section Chief John, Chief O, and Deputy Manager Kong are gone in an instant. Seo stands in the silence, his eyes shadowed with a grim sense of deja vu. He remembers this exact moment from 50 years ago. No matter how hard they screamed back then, the immortals ignored them like insignificant insects and just kept moving. He looks down at his arm, now fully healed and restored. A small mercy in a brutal world. As the survivors catch their breath, a streak of light tears across the night sky. One of the men huffs in frustration, demanding to know what they are supposed to do in a place like this. More lights follow, shimmering like falling stars, and the group wonders if there is something significant waiting for them in that direction. The next day brings a violent storm with lightning arching across a dark rain-soaked sky. Inside the safety of a cave, things take a turn for the worse as Deputy Manager O begins coughing up blood, her body finally reaching its limit. Another woman panics, begging Seo to do something, asking if there's any kind of herb they can use to save her from this terrible condition. Seo doesn't move, he looks away coldly, telling them they should just wait a little longer, suggesting that someone might eventually appear to heal her. The group sits around a small fire, the tension thick enough to cut. Suddenly someone gasps as a sound echoes from the cave. Entranced, the steady rhythmic thud of footsteps approaches through the darkness. A tall silhouette emerges from the shadows, his voice smooth and dangerous. He remarks that seeing mortals on the ascension path is like watching ants suffering in a war between dragons. As he steps into the light he reveals a calm, knowing smile, introducing himself as the Sea Dragon King Seo Eun-hyun. Outside, the storm rages with a violent intensity, its unnatural power swirling around the stone entrance of the cave. The Sea Dragon King, Seo Eun-hyun, stands calmly before the group, explaining that this tempest appeared out of nowhere and that he arrived specifically to investigate its cause. He turns his attention toward the unconscious Miss O, concluding that this ordinary woman with no trace of cultivation must be the one wielding this overwhelming power, though she is doing so entirely without conscious effort. Deputy Manager Seo tries to ground the situation, explaining that they are merely a group of confused people who haven't been in this world for long. He expresses the group's growing despair, asking if the Dragon King has also come to simply take away his companions like the others before him. To the group's shock, Seo Eun-hyun throws his head back and lets out a boisterous, mocking laugh. He finds it highly amusing that among a single group of colleagues, there were several individuals with such extraordinary potential that powerful cultivators showed up to take them away as if it were a prearranged event. Standing over the fallen woman, he remarks on the strange convenience of his own appearance right in front of her, while the protagonist can only offer a quiet, resigned confirmation. The Dragon King leans in, his glowing eye fixed on the protagonist as he asks that dear mortal if he even understands the true nature of their location. He reveals that this place is the Ascension Path, a critical gateway that serves as the bridge to the upper realm. In just a few months, a dimensional rift known as the Ascension Gate is destined to open in this very spot. Because this gateway only opens once every 1,000 years, it draws countless high-level cultivators and spiritual beasts from all over, making it perfectly logical that beings of his stature would appear nearby. Director Kim is visibly shaken by this news, stammering about how his kidnapped colleagues could possibly join a sect if those sects are meant to be leaving this world behind. He struggles to understand how a mortal could join an ascension to the upper realm. Seo Eun-hyun dismisses the question with a smirk, noting that the intricacies of high-level magic are far beyond the understanding of mortals. He reveals a small, white porcelain bottle and explains that cultivators possess techniques used to shrink massive objects so they can be stored inside magical tools. The sects that took his colleagues have likely packed their entire organizations into similar items, aiming to carry their whole sect into the upper realm once the gate opens. To demonstrate the scale of this power, he mentions a staggering fact. Inside his own small item, he has packed an entire undersea castle of the Sea Dragon clan, where 1,800 sea dragons currently lie dormant. The survivors can only stare in wide-eyed shock at the sheer impossibility of what they are hearing. Suddenly, the Dragon King reaches down for Miss O, prompting the director to cry out and rush forward in a desperate attempt to stop him. However, the mere aura of the king is like a physical weight. The director is slammed to the ground, gasping for air as his body buckles. He groans in agony, sweating and straining against the invisible pressure. Seo Eun-hyun lifts the unconscious woman into his arms, declaring that he will provide her with his own blood and accept her as his kin, claiming this is the best outcome for everyone. As he turns to leave, he offers one final, chilling piece of advice to the men on the floor. He explains that he only bothered to answer their questions because he was feeling particularly generous today. In the brutal reality of the martial realm, most cultivators would have simply killed them for the mere insolence of asking a question in the first place. The storm outside reaches a sudden, violent crescendo as lightning tears through the clouds. In a flash of brilliant light, the man vanishes, and a massive blue dragon soars into the sky, disappearing into the heart of the tempest. The bright sun rises over a world that has become a nightmare, casting a deceptively peaceful light over the forest. The realization finally hits the group like a physical blow: everyone has been kidnapped. Eun-hyun stares blankly into the distance, her mind struggling to process the sheer absurdity of their situation. She mutters to herself about the avalanche that started it all, followed by the terrifying sight of immortals and dragons abducting her colleagues. She can't help but let out a hysterical, broken laugh at the madness of it all. Manager Seo walks over and offers a silent hand of support, patting her shoulder as she sits defeated on a cold rock. She looks up at him with tear-filled eyes, pleading with him not to be taken away as well. She knows that in this hostile wilderness, she won't be able to survive a single day alone without him. Seo looks down at her with a pensive expression, thinking that unfortunately, their small moment of safety is already over. Suddenly, Eun-hyun screams in shock as a massive surge of energy erupts around her. Director Kim panics, shouting that something is coming and asking what is wrong with her, but the sheer pressure of the atmosphere makes it clear they are no longer alone. Birds flee the canopy in a panicked cloud as the air itself begins to crackle and boom with power. A terrifying, mechanical beast with white armor and glowing eyes emerges from the forest, carrying an old man on its back. The man scoffs at the sight of mere mortals on the path to ascension, but he quickly deduces that they must have been caught in a spatial storm caused by the opening of the ascension gate. He cackles to himself, marveling at his own genius for figuring it out so quickly. The old man floats down toward them, his purple robes billowing as he demands to know who emitted that massive consciousness he sensed from afar. He fixes his gaze on Eun-hyun, his creepy, monocled face twisting into a grin as he wonders if a girl like her could actually possess a presence that rivaled a sage from the upper realm. With a casual wave of his hand, he unleashes a blast of energy that sends Director Kim and the other man tumbling through the grass. He grabs Eun-hyun by the chin, offering to take her in and awaken a spiritual root for her with his own power. He is fascinated by her strange consciousness and wants to see what it will evolve into. Eun-hyun can only weep, her face squeezed in his grip as she mutters for the director and manager Seo. This display of attachment annoys the old man, who asks if she is seriously still clinging to her worldly ties after he offered her such a grand opportunity. To force her compliance, he uses his power to lift the two men into the air, slowly choking them. He declares that he will sever those ties himself, prompting Eun-hyun to scream and beg for their lives, promising to do anything he asks. The old man demands that she forget everything about her past life, and with no other choice, she whispers that she understands. The men are dropped unceremoniously back to the ground. However, the old man decides that leaving them nearby is still too much of a risk for her focus, so he decides to return them to a mortal nation. He opens a swirling, dark portal, explaining that they will be randomly scattered through a dimensional rift to a place even he can't predict. Director Kim is sucked into the void, screaming in terror, while Seo lunges forward in a desperate attempt to grab the precious herbs they gathered before they are lost forever. As the portal begins to close, Eun-hyun reaches out one last time, crying out in despair as her friends vanish into the unknown. The darkness of the rift is replaced by the sudden, vibrant sounds of a marketplace. Merchants shout about the finest silks in Yenhua and new scriptures from Xingji, their voices filling the air with the mundane noise of civilization. Seo and Director Kim wake up on a hard stone floor in a cluttered storage room, groaning as they regain consciousness. Seo drags himself to his feet and looks out into the alleyway, wondering where on earth they have landed. As he steps out into the street, his business shoes clicking on the stone, he realizes the immortal was telling the truth about the randomness of the rift. Yet, as he shields his eyes from the afternoon sun, a strange sense of familiarity begins to wash over him. He looks up at the massive, red-walled pagodas and the bustling crowds of the city. Standing there with his clothes torn and his mind racing, he realizes exactly where he is, Seokyung City, the capital of Yenhua, and the very place where he spent 50 years of his first life. The bustling streets of Seokyung City come into view, a place teeming with life, history, and the vibrant energy of a capital. Inside a quiet, dusty storage room, the reality of their sudden displacement begins to sink in. Director Kim looks around at the crates and shadows, admitting with a heavy sigh that he simply can't keep up with everything that's happening anymore. Manager Seo stands quietly beside him, his expression unreadable as he thinks to himself that he doesn't really know what's going on either. In his mind, he sees a dark vision of his past life, a time when he was nothing more than a powerless herb gatherer, forced to bow and scrape in the dirt before those with more power. He knows they can't hide in this alleyway forever, so when the director suggests they move out into the open, Seo agrees with a simple, resolute nod. As they emerge from the shadows, the true scale of the capital reveals itself, a massive expanse of tiled roofs and winding streets that seems to stretch on forever. The streets are crowded with locals in fine traditional dress, and as the two modern men walk past, the air is filled with the sound of hushed whispers and judgmental glances. Director Kim, still wearing his bright orange hiking jacket, is startled to realize that everyone is staring at them and openly mocking their funny-looking clothes. Seo, despite the brutal bloodstain still marring the back of his shirt, gives the director a confident grin and tells him not to worry because he knows a bit of Chinese. Kim's face lights up with pure, wide-eyed relief, genuinely impressed that his manager has such a useful skill in a place like this. Internally, Seo admits he was lying. The language spoken here isn't actually Chinese at all, and while the characters are the same, the sounds are completely different to his ears. He remembers his past life, where he spent 2 agonizing months being mocked by beggars just to learn the very basics of how to communicate in this city. Now, however, there is no need for that struggle. He holds up a bundle of supplies and suggests they get some new clothes, though the director is skeptical that anyone here would even accept their modern money. They make their way to a grand, traditional pharmacy, the entrance marked by an imposing, ornate sign that hints at the treasures within. Inside, the old shopkeeper's eyes nearly pop out of his head as he holds a massive root in his trembling hands, shouting in disbelief that they are actually letting him buy such precious herbs. He bows low and submissively before Seo, explaining that these yellow bamboo roots are at least 800 years old and are easily worth 15 silver ingots. Seo maintains a stoic, cool face, but his heart skips a beat. He realizes that in his entire 50-year past life, he never once possessed that much wealth at one time. He plays it cool, giving a dismissive cough and telling the merchant to hurry up with the payment, to which the man eagerly complies. Under a clear blue sky, their fortunes have changed in an instant. Director Kim stands in front of a sprawling, beautiful multi-story estate, his jaw dropping as he asks if this is really the house they are going to live in. Now dressed in fine traditional robes, Seo smiles and promises that from this day forward, he will personally teach the director the language of this land. As he looks at a single silver ingot in his palm, Seo realizes that while they look successful, the cost of living in the capital is staggering. After bribes for identity plaques and buying the estate, this is all they have left. As he turns away, the dark bloodstains on his back serve as a grim reminder of the physical price he has already paid to get this far. The director, feeling a new sense of equality in this strange world, suggests that they should just call each other by name, a request that Seo readily accepts. As night falls and the full moon rises over their new home, the lanterns cast a warm, inviting glow against the dark wood of the estate. Inside, a single lamp burns as Seo reflects on the herbs he sold to secure their current safety. He looks over the remaining roots spread out on a table, knowing that if they run out of herbs, they will run out of income entirely. The director ponders the situation, suggesting they use their remaining silver to start a business and create a steady stream of revenue. But for Seo, a simple business is not enough to satisfy his hunger. His eyes narrow with a fierce, cold ambition. He has regressed for a reason, and he decides it is time to start dreaming much bigger than he ever did before. He looks at director Kim Young-hoon and sees something more than just a colleague. He sees a man who is a genuine martial genius. He remembers how the man once mastered third-rate martial arts books sold on the street and became a master in only a few months. Seo envisions a future where the man standing before him becomes one of the most powerful martial artists in the entire Jianghu. Seo Eun-hyun stares at director Kim, a wild theory taking root in his mind. What if this man, who became a legend later in his first life, were to learn advanced martial arts from the very start? He realizes that with the right guidance, he might be able to shift forward the birth of the greatest swordsman in the entire Jianghu by at least 30 long years. A dark, ambitious smirk plays across his face as he decides to benefit as much as he can while working for the future legend, officially introducing the director to Murim, the brutal world of martial arts. Back at their estate, while sorting through their remaining herbs, Seo planting a seed of worry, suggesting that once they set up a business, the local gangs of the Jianghu will surely come for them. He asks if they shouldn't at least learn a bit of self-defense, which sends the director into a state of wide-eyed excitement. Kim is eager but skeptical, wondering how they could possibly learn when the great sects never teach their secrets to outsiders. As a self-proclaimed Murim novel nerd, Seo knows exactly how to pique the man's interest. He explains that in this city, there are 7 famous sects known as the 4 Stars and the 3 Demons. On the orthodox side, you have the demon-slaying sect, the Buddhist self-binding temple, the information-gathering suppressing bird house, and the ancient 7 mysteries sect. On the other hand, the 3 demons, the Wolf Fong Gang, the Dark Knight Association, and the Dragon Fighting Stronghold, are notorious for illegal activities, stealth, and sorcery. When asked which he prefers, the director enthusiastically chooses the demon-slaying sect, declaring that a true martial artist should wield a sword and a man must master blade techniques. Seo watches him with a focused gaze, knowing this choice is fitting for the man who was considered the best swordsman in his past life. When the director asks how he knows so much, Seo just laughs it off, claiming he was simply eavesdropping on some martial artists earlier that day. 3 months later, the pair arrives at the imposing gates of the demon-slaying sect, only to be stopped by a group of stern-faced guards. Seo introduces Kim as his older brother, explaining that they've heard of the sect's fame and wish to learn. The lead guard, a massive, muscular man, looks them over with a skeptical, Noting their fine clothes, the guard admits they look wealthy enough, but bluntly states that learning martial arts at the director's age will be incredibly difficult. Not one to take no for an answer, Seo flashes a bright smile and a shimmering silver coin, asking if they could at least speak to someone of a higher status for the sake of simple self-defense. The bribe works, and they are led deep into the massive complex to meet a sect official. When asked again about their goals, Seo presents a heavy chest overflowing with silver ingots, begging for the best instruction available. The official clears his throat, his eyes fixed greedily on the silver, and begrudgingly admits that Kim could join as an external disciple. However, as he hauls the treasure away, he coldly adds that they don't provide special treatment for donations and that they will only accept one of them. Seo is internally reeling, realizing that all that money, worth a priceless yellow bamboo root, only bought them the lowliest rank in the sect. Director Kim is furious, beginning to shout that they are being ripped off, but Seo quickly silences him with a bow of gratitude, insisting that his brother will be the one learning. The official tells them to meet outside with the other external disciples later and disappears with their fortune. Kim is heartbroken, wondering what the point is if only he learns, especially considering how much they just paid. Seo reassures him with a laugh, claiming he was never good at sports anyway and that he'll focus on running the business to support Kim's training. Moved by the sacrifice, a teary-eyed director Kim promises to do his absolute best as Seo watches him, offering a quiet word of thanks. 7 months pass in a flash, leading to a major competition held within the grounds of the sect. Up in the VIP seating, a sect elder stands in a state of absolute, armrest-crushing shock. He can't believe his eyes as some random outsider from nowhere has just systematically defeated every single one of his beloved top disciples, leaving the entire demon-slaying sect in a state of total uproar.